All right, gents, let's see how many times this giant chode Piers Morgan can sit on the fence. Pay close attention. He's very clever, very sneaky. He won't pick a side. If he sees that, the majority of the panel, by the way, if you're a right winger, what the hell is that face? What is that face? I don't hear any right winger being like, all right, listen, Michael Knowles has some good points, but the dude is cringe. Like, it's just total cringe. No one will say it. But getting back to Piers Morgan, pay attention. He likes to play both sides. He's very clever how he words these things. If the panel's going one way, he'll tell himself, okay, coast is clear. I can say this or that. However, he always inserts this little bit of this safety net. Pay attention. And by the way, I love that Dave Smith goes on here and, tells the world the truth that you won't hear anywhere else. But why doesn't Dave Smith call out Piers? It's like everyone's afraid to call him out on his own show. And the more times they would do that, people would stop going on the show. Simple. I get it. It's media, clicks, money, whatever. But this guy's got to go. He's worth what? Allegedly like $200 million. That's enough, man. You're good. So are your kids.
Welcome back to Uncensored.
Thank you.
There's a lot going on. I decided to have a week off after Christmas. Big mistake. Never have a week off in the Trump administration. It seemed like all hell was breaking loose. And yet, if you park the rhetoric, which can be very incendiary on all sides, and you cut to the presumed ideology of what Trump is trying to do here, I do see the argument.
So there's the first one. If you park the rhetoric of the ideology, I don't necessarily agree with. That's what he does the entire show. And we have to call it out. Everybody. Like, he's good. I don't know how else to say it. He's good. He doesn't need any more. How many sponsors does he play in one segment? I think I was like up to 13 one time. And all he does is grift. Grift. Now, if we're being honest for a second, both sides grift all day, every day. I don't see many channels calling that out. If you're nice and snug on the right, you want to fit in. You don't want to be the oddball out. Same on the left. But if we can get this topic out there more often, maybe, just maybe, they'll stop watching Piers Morgan, so-called uncensored. Listen, I'll probably just include the Piers sitting on the fence moments, but I will include Kyle absolutely destroying the cringe boy Knowles, who, by the way, again, why no right winger talks about the Christian right wingers don't talk about, his past. Many people don't know he played a gay dude in some movie or show, whatever, kissing, touching, groping, whatever. Nobody mentions that. Why?
I not agree with all of it, but I see the logic of what he's trying to do and why he thinks it's in America's interest. And that applies to whether it's Venezuela and getting rid of Maduro or whether it's the Iran situation and so on. Do you see the logic, even if you don't agree with it all?
No.
Okay.
Piers, it's as you said, Donald Trump can say America first means whatever I say it means, but if America first meant one thing to everybody who's ever uttered the phrase, and then he wants to change that to mean America first means regime changes all around the world, huge, enormous, unthinkable bloated defense budgets like he just requested from Congress. And if he's going to think that none of his supporters are going to have a problem with that, or that they're all just going to change their views because he decided to change his, I think he's going to find out how well that works for him in the midterms this year. And I think it's going to be a disaster. And Obviously it's true, Piers, as you said, and we all know Donald Trump will say all types of crazy things and then never follow through with that. But he also just asked Congress for a $1.5 trillion defense budget. And that to me does indicate that he is anticipating a real deal war coming up, or at least the possibility of it. And if he means the things that he says, I mean, I don't exactly know how you do that. I don't know how you say we run Venezuela and we'll dictate who the next regime is and we'll dictate where the oil goes without at least an effort of like 100,000 troops. I'm not even sure that would be enough to do it. So it's unclear what exactly the next move is going to be, and that's really when we'll find out what he's going to do. But no, Piers, the idea that we're 38 or maybe 39 by the end of the show trillion dollars in debt right now. We have major problems in this country, and we have a hot war raging on in Europe, which is a proxy war between the entire West and the biggest nuclear armed power in the history of the world. The idea that we would go flirting with multiple wars of choice at this point, it's not left wing or right wing. It's just reckless. There's no wisdom in it.
Michael Knowles, I guess the argument against what Trump is doing is that many people who voted for Trump,
I guess the argument,
bought into the concept that what America first was take care of what's happening in your own backyard and stop meddling in foreign affairs. And now they're waking up almost on a daily basis to seeing Donald Trump proudly and aggressively talking about meddling in all sorts of foreign affairs. Is there a contradiction or hypocrisy or even a betrayal of voters going on here?
Not at all. First of all, Venezuela is in our own backyard, and it's been the policy of the United States in 1803 to manage the Western Hemisphere. So that that's a cornerstone of American foreign policy. I think it is charming that Dave is defining America first in the way that he prefers, and I think there are plenty of people who wish to do that. But Dave, though,
right, left, Christian, not Christian, doesn't matter. Look at the face he's about to make. You tell me that's a trustworthy face and not the cringiest thing you've ever seen in your life. That's what I'm saying.
a very popular podcaster, never won a presidential election. And Trump has been clear on what he means by America First, the political movement that he built, that people voted for in his coalition since the beginning. President Trump campaigned the first time around on destroying ISIS. So obviously that does not mean that America's only going to look inward. President Trump has carried out attacks, military operations that were extremely successful in Iran, in Syria, and Afghanistan, obviously in Venezuela. He's been talking about taking Greenland and even invading America's evil top hat, Canada, though I think he's mostly joking about that one, since the beginning. So that's what that means. And what it comes down to is that America is a global empire. We just are. People can be upset about that, but unless your geopolitics comes strictly from Reddit, if your geopolitics actually comes from history, you recognize that we've been an empire since the Louisiana Purchase, okay? And we've been a muscular global empire since the Second World War. So President Trump's vision, I think, actually rejects two extremes. It rejects a conservative isolationism, and it rejects a liberal internationalism, and it posits a conservative imperialism that says that we are going to recognize our role in the world, but we are going to pursue that role in limited ways with America's interest at heart. So there's been no regime change in Venezuela. We're talking about regime change in Venezuela. The regime is still in place. What we did was depose the leader. We left the vice president in place, and we said, act in a way that is appropriate in accordance with the law and our interests, or we're going to kill you. That's very different than a Bushy era.
Act in accordance with what we say, or we're gonna off you. Who's we, Michael Knowles? And so many of these both sides, left, right, influencers, gamers. Who's we? Half these guys, they never have, never will join any military. Their kids, they're not planning on having their kids join any military. Who's we? Are your kids that vital? Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh? I mean, I'd say Ben Shapiro, if he or his kids join any military, it's not going to be the U.S. I could, you know what I mean. I'm sick of these dudes, man. I'm sick of it. We. There's no we here. It's the rich and then the low, middle, working class, which happened to be the military families, the veterans who were raising their kids to be pro-military. Yeah, you should join this. And no. That needs to end. I say, let's bring the draft back. I sincerely believe many of the issues we have in this world today are because there is no draft. Michael Knowles. Right.
Hey, Carl Kalinske, I can see you grimacing through a lot of what Michael was saying there. You said Trump says the US will run Venezuela and he threatens Colombia and Mexico. Arrest this psychotic motherfucker. Before I get you to expand on that thesis, I mean, the point I was making to Dave, if I want to elaborate on where I sit with this, because I've had a bit of time to look at this play out, is you look at Maduro. Everyone thought, my God, this is going to be World War III. Actually, Maduro's going to end up in a New York courtroom and he's been got rid of. Everyone seems to agree that's a good thing for not just the Venezuelan people, but the world. No American troops died.
Did you catch it? Everyone seems to agree. Do they, Piers? Do they? Does everyone seem to agree? Disgusting. Stop watching this clown.
What was an incredibly efficient surgical military strike to get him out of there. And if you have a more compliant leader of Venezuela, albeit part of the same regime, that can probably only be a good thing. If you look at the argument about Greenland, for example, I've been struck by some of the people that I didn't expect to think this was a good idea. It was a British general last week talking about this, saying that from a strategic security point of view, it would make perfect sense for America to have Greenland. And is there a deal to be done? He didn't think invading it was the right thing, and nor do I. But is there a deal to be done with 60,000 people who live in Greenland that could actually improve the security of the United States and the West against the obvious threat from China and Russia and so on? And I can go through the others. Iran, getting rid of the Ayatollah and the mullahs is unquestionably a good thing for the world. It's how you do these things and whether you plan and prepare properly for what follows next that I think are the debatable points. And history says that's normally, unfortunately, been very badly done. But this is what I meant when I said to Dave that I understand the argument. I may not agree with all of it, but I do understand the logic to what Trump is doing here. Do you?
No, because we don't have a right to act like this around the world. We're supposed to be a nation among nations, not a nation above nations. And they used to at least lie to us in the past and say that this is good for the world and we're spreading freedom and democracy. Now they don't even bother to lie. Now it's naked, rank, disgusting imperialism where they say, we're going to take the oil. And the point is that we're going to take the oil. We're going to take the minerals. We're going to take the precious metals. We're doing this for our corporations. We're doing it for the Epstein class, the billionaires. And this, to piggyback on what Dave Smith said, is frankly not what many of the MAGA voters thought they were signing up for. They thought America First actually meant America First. By the way, you also replaced the Maduro regime with the Maduro regime. Congratulations on that. It's also been now a week straight of pro-regime protests. Now you have roving gangs of Venezuelan militias that are kidnapping Americans. But again, I come back to the fundamental point, which is if you sign on to stuff like this, you're saying might makes right and the law of the jungle is back. What you're saying is China has a right to go into whatever smaller country they want and depose the leader and say we're doing it because we can and we have the right to do it and we have bigger guns and there's nothing you can do to stop it. So they're never going to address that fundamental question, which is why do we have a right? Do we actually believe in international law or was that all a joke? Are we rolling the clock back to the 1700s and the 1800s and we're going super primitive style here? And I think the answer to that
international law goes back to antiquity. It's not some creation of modernity, whether we're talking about the 1700s or the 20th century.
The Geneva Conventions, the Nuremberg Tribunal, the Geneva Conventions and the Nuremberg Tribunal.
Yes, those exist, but international laws, the jus gentium goes back to antiquity. However, unfortunately, a lot of our liberal friends think history began a few decades ago.
And that's the face, gents, right there. That's the face. I don't hear one right-winger, so-called critical thinker, so-called calling balls and strikes, calling out Michael Knowles every time he's brought up. The gay acting in some TV or film, I don't hear any of that. You know why? Because they're grifting to you. They'll call the whatever podcast, make videos about crushing some female, the lefty loony, but they won't make a video calling out the cringe on your own side. Why? Because they're grifting. It's simple. It's all about clicks. It's all about views. It's all about money. And it's all about sticking together. The right has to stick together. That's called lying. You're grifting. At least be a man and say it.
The League of Nations was useless. It fell apart, and that's why we had the UN. That's why we had the Geneva Convention.
Right, I'm talking about millennia ago,
because we looked
not
at
merely a
piles
century
of
ago. But it's
millions
true.
of
Woodrow
dead
Wilson
bodies,
failed
and
with
we
the League
said
of
that's a
Nations,
bad
that's true.
idea. We looked at piles of millions of dead bodies and said that's a bad idea. Let's not do that anymore. Let's actually have a framework and rules and laws. And Trump is blowing that up. By the way, he bombed fishing boats from Venezuela, Trinidad and Tobago, and Colombia. He just did the regime change in Venezuela. He bombed Yemen and
he bombed
Somalia
drug
and
boats,
Nigeria
that's
and
true.
Iran.
He bombed
He's threatening
narco-terrorists.
Greenland and Panama and
Some are happy
Canada
about
and
that.
Cuba and Mexico. And you sit there the whole time and act like it's okay. Is there anything Trump
It's
can do,
okay.
Michael Knowles,
It's
that
good.
you would say, I condemn it, and you hop off the Trump train, or are you going to tickle his taint for the rest of your fucking life?
No, there have been plenty of Trump policies that I've criticized because he's only right about 99.78% of the time. So
And that right there, I mean, along with the face thing, is why I'm off. I want nothing to do with the Trump train and the right. Like, I don't want any side. That right there. Could you imagine if it was like a Destiny or some other lefty who used that exact line? Well, they're only right. That's, dude, the cringe is out of control. And the fact that we don't see anyone on the right calling it out is why I want no part of it. It's that sheep syndrome, man.
First Step
Horrific.
Act, I thought
Such
was a
a cuck.
misstep. But I would say the
Such a
rest.
cuck.
Excuse me. I would say the rest of the
Such a cuck.
the administration has been very successful. What's your problem? What's
My
what's your
problem is that
criticism?
you're a cuck and you're a hack and you're not an independent thinker and you're meat riding Trump.
Why do you
and
say
you
that?
know that what he's doing in
I just
imperialism
answered your
and you don't
question.
care.
I just
Yeah,
answered your question and I
99.78%.
corrected
Congratulations.
the
You rented your
misstatements that
brain
you
to
made.
a war criminal pedophile rapist. I hope you're happy.
A war criminal pedophile rapist? Do you you brought
Did
up
I
a
stutter?
point? You brought up international law, and you made a very false point, a dumb point, which is that international law began only a few hundred years ago. I corrected you, and I pointed out that the international law
you
is
didn't.
part of the Western tradition. That, excuse me, one second. It goes back to antiquity. It's a principle of the jus gentium. And then you said, well, international law has failed because of the League of Nations failure, which I think is actually undermining your argument and proving my point and proving Trump's point, because the liberal internationalism that was established by people like Woodrow Wilson did in fact fail, which is why we need to restore an older and more classical conception of the international order, which is precisely what Trump's doing. So I think you've hoisted
Might make
yourself with
right.
your own petard.
Might
and then
make
you
right.
just make
Law
a
of the
lot
jungle
of
might make
vulgar
right.
sort of non sequiturs because you don't have a leg to stand on.
All right, let me bring in.
Let me ask you this
hang
question. Hold on, Piers.
hang-
Let me ask him a question real quick. Tell me the name of the Minister of Defense in Venezuela.
I don't know.
Right. Could you imagine how many videos, how many clips there would be of some lefty kissing the ass of any lefty politician for that long? What was that, like a good 2 minutes? And then being asked a simple question on the topic and them saying, well, I don't know. How many right wingers, the debate bros, would be making clips saying, see guys, you see, they're not critical thinkers over there, bro. They're just not. This is what I'm talking about.
Whatever his name
Well,
is.
and that's the
Garcia
problem, is
or
that you're
Rodriguez or
advocating for a
something.
regime change. You don't know the first thing.
I didn't. I
about
just
the
said the
country.
opposite.
You're
I
advocating
argued
for the
against a regime change.
He
Kyle,
actually
you have
said
to get
the
cotton out
opposite.
of your ears.
I heard Michael
Kyle, I just want to correct something. You
Michael
said I'm
Knowles
arguing.
say,
And there's Piers bringing her home. Well, hey, I heard him say, dude, curry that favor, man. Curry that favor. Right now, Piers thinks that it's like 4-on-1. That's probably what's going on in his head. So he's like, shoot, man, I better sit the fence over here. And he will. Just watch.
the regime remains there, right? So he said the opposite, in fact. I want to bring in Coleman.
No, but he wanted to take out Maduro. Don't give me that cutesy little
Yes,
BS.
but he
That's
made
not a
the point that the
regime.
regime
US
is still.
intervention.
He made the point the regime is still there, and the vice president appears to be much more compliant.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I wish Dave Smith, I like him. I really do. That's what I wish he would start doing. And many others. Not the Walshes and the Knowles. calling Pierce out, just like Kyle just did. Don't give me that cutesy little BS. That's what we need more to do. More guys doing that.
With running Venezuela the way America would prefer for its national security than Maduro. So that's what Michael said. He didn't advocate regime change. Let me bring in Coleman Hughes. Coleman,
Kidnapping the president is
well,
not
hang on, Carl. Let me bring in
regime change.
Coleman hasn't said a word yet. Coleman, well, see, that to me, Dave Smith, is part of the interesting part of all this, is that it's how this plays out. It's what actually Trump really wants to do. If he doesn't take, for example, what China has been doing in Africa for the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. It's been going around Africa pretty quietly, actually, unless you're actually in Africa. And it's been doing endless commercial deals with African countries where they go in, they spend a lot of money on infrastructure and hospitals and bridges and roads and all these things. And in return, they get access to huge amounts of minerals. And that's been going on for 20 years. And that's a kind of economic imperialism. I see no ideological difference between that and what Trump is potentially talking about with Greenland, which is clearly incredibly important strategically, from a security point of view, from a mineral point of view, and so on. And there are only 60,000 people who live there, and it may well be that they're happy to do a deal if the price is right, in which case, what's the difference?
Yeah. Well, I'll say I pretty much agree with Coleman, I guess, on that. Like, if it's voluntary, then okay. I don't really know enough about Greenland to really speak on it intelligently, but I could not disagree more with the take on Venezuela. And I think it's crazy, Piers. I also think, it just after the last 25 years, and I'm not saying they're exactly the same, but the idea that we're just talking about regime changes in Iran and Venezuela and saying it would undoubtedly be a good thing if this regime were to fall. Well, maybe, but there's a really important question of what comes next. And if you want to say that, we've had a long history of regime changes in Latin America that have been disastrous too. We overthrew a communist government in the 50s in Guatemala, led to a civil war where hundreds of thousands of people died. So the idea that it's a guarantee that it would be a good thing if either one of these regimes fell, we certainly don't know that. And one of the other things we know is that you really don't get much of a say in what replaces the regime that falls unless you're willing to militarily occupy the country. And we've had regime change. We might be able to affect a full regime change without a military occupation, as we did in Libya, as we did in Syria. But those are not great examples where the country worked out. I mean, Syria is hanging on by a hair, and Libya is an absolute catastrophe. And so it's just like, it's very reckless when you start playing. You start dropping bombs on human beings, you start toppling governments, you start kidnapping or taking, leaders of countries. There's unintended consequences that come with all of these things. That's probably the one lesson in all of this military history, is that nobody is smart enough to predict exactly what's going to come next. And so I just think it's, I see this with the situation in Iran. I say Michael Knowles are there. It's like, guys, it's like you hoist up the mission accomplished banner 2 days after the strike. We have absolutely no idea what's going to come of this. Obviously, in the situation in Iran, just right in front of all of our eyes, Piers, what the goalposts have moved from 60% enriched uranium, which is what me and Coleman were arguing about a few months ago. That's out the window now, right? Nobody even cares about or is pretending there's a nuclear threat. Donald Trump's bragging about how it's obliterated. Then both Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump moved the goalpost to intercontinental ballistic missiles, and then that was the war propaganda for a couple months there. Now it's over whether they shoot protesters or rioters. Not even like an accusation that they're committing a genocide or are a threat to another country. They invaded their neighbor, nothing like that. So I would just say, I think one of the most important lessons, and Michael, who's a history buff, would know that every last one of the founders of this country talked about this all the time, is that you want to be sober and calm and rational. You want to not intervene when you don't.
Exactly. And listen, anyone spewing that nonsense, if we can, we should, and we will. Just ask yourself, are any of these guys going to go do it? Are any of them going to go join any military or their kids? The Michael Knowles, the Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro's? I mean, he definitely won't. Even the Nick Fuenteses. You think he's going to be joining any military anytime soon? Of course not. So ask yourself, are you in that group? Are you a part of that group? If they don't, then you shouldn't either. Don't be raising those kids to go, pro-military this and joining that. Nah, I truly believe it's time to tag the rich in. Let them go fight the wars. Till next time.